Hey Internet, I'm Chris, and this is the place on the internet where I talk about comics, movies, games, and things I'm generally passionate about. So New York Comic Con came and went. It went by in a blur. I have to say, this is probably the quickest New York Comic Con I can ever think of. A lot of that had to do with, since this is the first year, I've kind of gone, seeing myself as a creator with podcasts, with my co-host Troy and friend. We went together. We were able to meet a lot of people in real life, like the Comic Pals, the Oblivion Bar podcast guys. Also, a couple people I've met on Threads. I was able to meet I Don't Beat Games. He has a great YouTube channel. So I spent a lot of time talking to people and people that I've had on the podcast and also like have met before. So it just was a great time in terms of like meeting people and sort of building that community, networking. It was just a great time in that regard. There were some great announcements when it came to comic books, the DC Jim Lee and Friends panel. There was a Vigilante series coming from Seeley and Mitch Gerrits, which is going to be like half Vigilante, half Eagly, that has the type of sensibility that the series has. So we'll finally get that version of Vigilante in the comics, which I'm really excited about. Jim Lee brought on Jeff Loeb, Scott Williams, and Alex Sinclair to announce Hush 2, which was highly speculated already. So I think DC overall won the weekend when it comes to comics. But the reason I wanted to make this video is that I feel like there is sort of a problem with Comic-Con that I wanted to talk about, particularly New York Comic-Con. And I think this probably applies to San Diego, which I've never been to. But the reason I wanted to make this video is just kind of talk about sort of the state of New York Comic Con. There's some great things, and I think it's still a great place for community, meeting people that you may have met online through different communities, whether it be comic books, creation, entertainment, anime, manga, whatever you're into. But, I think since I started going, which was in 2011, I know I'm aging myself there, so I'm sorry, I'm old. You can see the grays. It seems like there's been a big pullback when it comes to comics at New York Comic Con, and not in terms of the vendors, but more of comic publishers. Marvel was probably the only major comic publisher there. There was no DC, and sort of they didn't have a booth. IDW, Dark Horse, Skybound, Image, all these different companies. Ghost Machine had one, but obviously like they're not a publisher. They are a creative company. But I think sort of with all the hype that was around DC, they did a really good job of, before panels, they had all-in advertisements, advertisements about comics. Obviously, Creature Commandos was there, and James Gunn did a good job of sort of, shepherding the new DCU. But I think there was nowhere to put that excitement for fans. Like, imagine, seeing that Creature Commandos, or even like, for example, like at the Jim Lee Hush panel, they're all wearing these awesome Hush 2 shirts. Jim Lee throws one in the crowd, talks about how, hey, go to dc.com. There's a QR code right there. And for the next 52 hours, you'll be able to buy that merch. Great. Awesome. Especially for people that are just like, hey, I'll just order it online and ship it to my house. I don't want to carry it around. But people would have probably ran to that booth if they were like, if there was a DC booth, hey, at our booth right now, I will be doing a signing, one. And then two, also, you could buy this Hush ash can along with the merch. And one, sort of DC makes money. And then also, two, that excitement gets to be put in somewhere, sort of. And I think that's kind of like where I'm getting at when it comes to New York Comic Con, and that like there's still like a lot of stuff in terms of the entertainment companies. They've pulled back a lot of ways, but that has a lot to do with the economy. So I think once the economy kind of runs, comes back, and hopefully, the film and TV industry recovers from the strikes and sort of what's going on with the economy, we'll see some of those bigger booths. There was a cool like Dexter booth that I really liked. But you could tell like even the Marvel booth, which is sort of a staple of New York Comic Con was a little bit smaller in terms of its footprint. It still had signings, it still had some costumes from the films and the TV shows, but you can tell that, they definitely pulled back, and they weren't selling anything, which, usually they have like an area where you could buy things, merch, and stuff like that. But the only thing you could really buy is a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, which is great. If you bought like a year subscription, you got this exclusive Daredevil Peach Momoko cover, which was really cool. I would have done it, but I already have a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, so I kind of skipped out on that, and I kind of regret it because it is a great cover. And if you see, they had the cover on the side of the booth, so that looked amazing. And also they shared sort of a new logo that was on the back of the booth. But if you've seen years past, if you've ever been to New York Comic Con, and I'm sure it's like that in San Diego and other cons they travel to, it's just much bigger. They were still able to get some excitement. Tom Hardy made an appearance, also Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio. But yeah, it just feels different when I used to like, and also me, like as a young journalist, when I started going as press back in the day, I had some great opportunities to interview like Mike Richardson, the founder of Dark Horse, just because Dark Horse had a presence there. I had some great opportunities when it came to comic creators and stuff, and I think that's really important in terms of getting the word out. And also, like, hey, like you have an exciting panel like the Jim Lee panel, like where is sort of the young comic readers or young comic creators that are able to go by, hey, the DC booth or the Marvel booth, meet an editor, talk to them, look over their work and stuff. We're losing the recipes when it comes to building the future of comics. Right now we're in a really good spot. You have the Absolute Universe, you have Ultimates, you have some great indie stuff, you have the Energon, Ghost Machine, some really great excitement. But as much as things seem to be turning the corner, we do have to remember like how we got here. And some of these things are still, the companies are still making some of the same mistakes, and I don't like to see that when it comes to that, because you don't want this moment to be a blip and then we're back to square one once people like Scott Snyder move on to something else after their run on Absolute Batman. You don't want that. You want people to be able to take on that baton and have a youthful energy like some other creative industries have. So I think that is really important. And even this is not something just relegated to comics. Like even like anime had a big presence there, but you could tell it was a little bit less than years past. And again, how much is that is people being less interested, the state of the economy. There's a lot of different things, and I think Comic-Con has to do a better job of obviously I don't know the inner workings of how much these things cost, how they get certain vendors there, but I think they do have to do a better job of incentivizing the comic publishers. It is called Comic-Con, to come to New York Comic Con, because I think DC still has a booth in San Diego. And, even when they're at New York, at my first New York Comic Con, it was an amazing booth. But after that, they kind of just had a corner of the Javits. So hopefully with this, energy that's going into All In and Absolute, that we hopefully see a day where they return to New York Comic Con in a big way. And hopefully the DCU, turns around sort of what people think of comic book movies, because right now they're also in a downturn. So if that turns around, then there's more fanfare around that stuff. Hopefully it means more money. And with more money, that would mean that these companies can justify the cost of creating a large booth to get people there. But yeah, overall, I think Comic-Con is great if you're trying to meet people that and really sort of like build that community. I think if you're going for what Comic-Con is supposed to provide, which is like the booths, waiting in line, playing games and all that, I don't know if it's worth the price of admission when you think about some of that stuff, because a lot of the games, for example, are games that are already out, so you're waiting on sometimes like lines 30 minutes plus just to play a game that you have at home. Like I said, the Dexter one was pretty cool. They put you in a kill room, so I think that's cool. But is that really worth the amount of money that you pay? And then also like in terms of food, I spent like $35 on a hot dog and curly fries, which was insane. But they have you hostage when you're there. I will say New York Comic Con in particular, has done a good job of sending out a survey after every Comic-Con to people that attended. My girlfriend calls me a Karen because I fill it out every year. But I will say, the one time I filled it out with like paragraphs, immediately, like the next year, they heard that feedback from I wasn't the only one complaining about it, but the photo booth situation one year was insane. This year it was pretty bad, but a lot of that had to do with they had Elizabeth Olsen, the Scarlet Witch, and we all know the Scarlet Witch is like basically the white woman Black Panther, and there were just plenty of Scarlet Witches that just wanted a photo with Mother. So I get it. I had to go through that crowd to get to my photo, which did not have a crowd, and I was almost late and almost lost money, which I had 2 photo ops canceled on me, which sucked. But I don't think there's much that Comic-Con can do about that, especially when that has to do with talent schedules and, things happen, life happens. But yeah, overall, I do think they need to improve the comic situation when it comes to the convention. There's a lot of comic vendors that sell back issues and stuff like that, but the publishers definitely need to come back in a big way because, like I said, all that excitement around the DC, like, booth and stuff, yes, it goes to Artist Alley and directly the artists and the writers, their lines, and people are talking to them. But I think the brands, it would do well if they had that energy going over there, where they had signings, where they had people looking over kids' portfolios and stuff like that. I think it would do really well for people to invest in comics, in the hobby, and that's what you want. But yeah, just wanted to ramble, talk about sort of my thoughts of Comic-Con and the state of Comic-Con. Like I said, it was great to meet some amazing people despite it going by super fast and me feeling like I didn't do enough and I spent too much money on shit that I didn't really need. I felt those relationships and those moments of meeting people in real life were something that are going to stay with me forever. And I hope, it leads to, beautiful things when it comes to this channel, the podcast, and a lot more. So yeah, peace.